What would you do if your own father set fire to your future while smiling? I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there and smiled while the 38 million check turned to ash in my father's hands, and that smile that confused him more than the inheritance itself. Because what he didn't know was, I never needed that check to know I'd already won. My name is Sloan Whitmore, and for most of my life, being a Whitmore meant something in Eastfield, Virginia. Our family name was on libraries, city parks, scholarship funds. But while the town saw legacy, I saw secrets, and I learned early on that blood didn't always mean loyalty. My grandfather, Harrison Whitmore, wasn't just the man who founded Whitmore Holdings, a company worth hundreds of millions. He was the man who raised me when my own father couldn't be bothered. While Daniel played CEO, investor, and victim depending on the year Harrison showed up. Every single Sunday, ice cream, botanical gardens, business talks disguised as storytelling. Success isn't about what you stack. He used to say, balancing his mint chip cone as if it were currency. It's about what survives you. I'd nod even when I was only 7, even when chocolate dripped onto my sundress because I believed him. I still do. While the world saw the Bentley and the mansion, I saw the man who'd sit for hours on a park bench with me asking me what kind of company I'd build if I could build anything. And I told him the truth every time, one with heart, one where no one's voice gets ignored, and he'd smile like that was the most revolutionary business model in the world. My father Daniel, on the other hand, saw everything through a different lens threat, especially when it came from within his own house. Especially when it came from me. He was the heir apparent, the only son of Harrison Whitmore. He had the connections, the private education, the blank checks. But he also had a habit of blowing it all up, either in business or with bourbon. I remember being 12, crouched at the top of the stairs, listening to him rage in the study. The kind of rage that didn't need fists to bruise you. You give her everything, he barked. You think she's so special. Just admit it, Dad Sloan's your real legacy. Harrison never raised his voice. That's what scared people most. Daniel, he said evenly, I give you everything a man could need to succeed, but you sabotage it every time. You want her respect, earn it. My mother Margot tried to be the glue, but she was only ever allowed to patch what Daniel didn't notice cracking. A former art curator, refined and intelligent, she was everything Daniel thought he could dominate, but never fully did. She kept the holidays from exploding and told me lies I think she believed at the time. Your father loves you. He just doesn't know how to show it. But I did know. There's a difference between absence and avoidance. One is loss. The other is rejection. As I got older, I became the target of my father's bitterness and my brother Evan's envy. Evan, 2 years younger, learned quickly that agreeing with our father got him rewards. He was the mirror Daniel needed the shadow of his ego. I tried to chart my own course. Evan coasted on our name. You're climbing the hard way, he told me once. Why use stairs when you've got an elevator with the family crest on it? Because I want to know every step I said. So no one can say I didn't earn it. They called me a snob, a martyr, the favorite. But the truth is, I never asked to be anyone's anything. I just wanted to become someone on my own. When college came, my father insisted I major in something ladylike. Literature, history, something befitting a future senator's wife. We don't need another Whitmore woman playing CEO in heels, he sneered over Thanksgiving dinner. Harrison never told me what to do. He asked, what excites you, Sloan? What keeps you up thinking, not worrying? And when I told him economics and business strategy, he didn't blink. He just nodded and handed me a book. Read this, then we'll talk. When I graduated top of my class and refused his offer to join the family business, I shocked them all. You're walking away from a sure thing, Daniel growled. No, I said. I'm building mine. I joined Madison Partners, the competitor he used to laugh at. Entry level. No special treatment, no shortcuts. But Harrison collected every trade article that mentioned my name, every memo I led, every team I promoted. He didn't brag. He archived. "Sloan doesn't need us to open doors," he once said to a board member. "She just needs the time to break them down herself." And that's exactly what I did while the rest of my family waited for Harrison to hand them keys to the empire. Evan got his keys early. Daniel installed him at a small branch within Whitmore Holdings. Predictably, he fumbled it. When an audit uncovered misuse of company funds, Evan begged me to cover it up. "Family protects family," he said. "Not at the expense of integrity," I replied. That was the beginning of the end, the point when bloodlines became battlegrounds. None of us knew then, but Harrison was already sick, and he was watching. But the real shock was still to come. The call came on a gray Tuesday in October. I was prepping a quarterly review deck for Madison Partners' tight timeline high stakes when my phone lit up with my mother's name. Margot never called during work hours. "It's your grandfather," she said, her voice unusually quiet. "You should come, now." By the time I reached St. Vincent's Medical, Harrison had already been stabilized, but the news wasn't good. A stroke. Severe. Age 84. His mind was sharp, but his body, not so much. I expected chaos. What I found was a pattern, and I wasn't the only one noticing it. The room filled fast relatives we hadn't seen in years. Uncle Charles, who once sued the family over a vineyard, now stood bedside like a dutiful nephew. Cousin Ivy, who used to complain about old money morality, suddenly whispering with the nurses. Even Aunt Eleanor, who accused Harrison of favoritism in the 90s, now brought him crossword books and chamomile tea. My father and Evan. They became daily visitors. Clean suits, fake smiles, overflowing concern. He's always been there for me. Daniel said one night at dinner, eyes suspiciously glossy with bourbon, "It's only right I'm here for him now." I said nothing. Harrison had warned me about this kind of performance. "The Whitmores don't circle out of loyalty," he once said. "They circle out of hunger." And now, the vultures were circling. Every morning before work, I'd come and sit quietly by Harrison's side. After hours, I'd return with chamomile books, photos. Sometimes he'd doze off in mid-conversation, but other nights we talked. Not about illness, not about death, about strategy, business, legacy, and eventually, secrets. One night, with the machine softly humming and rain tapping the window, he asked the nurses to step out. Then he said my name. "Sloan," he whispered, gripping my hand with startling strength. "I've made 2 plans. Plans," I asked, gently. "For the company, for everything, for the aftermath." His breathing was shallow, but his eyes burned with clarity. "Daniel will fight the first one. Let him. Let him think he's won." I sat straighter, trying to follow. His words were deliberate, low, almost encoded. "I've seen people clearly my whole life. Your father, Evan, you, especially you." I squeezed his hand, feeling my throat tighten. He continued, "You never asked me for anything, not even when I would have given you the world. That's why I'm giving it to you now." I tried to speak, but he cut me off with a weak shake of the head. "Alan will explain everything when the time comes. But promise me, this trust the process. Even when it seems like you've lost everything." I promised him. I didn't know what I was promising, but I knew better than to ignore the last strategy of a man who built an empire from nothing. The next morning, Alan Grayson Harrison's longtime attorney arrived with a stack of legal folders and an expression that gave nothing away. My father, as expected, pulled him aside. "We should review the company clauses," Daniel said. "Make sure everything is properly aligned." Alan smiled, polite but unreadable. "We'll cross that bridge at the appropriate time." I caught Alan's eye briefly. He gave me the slightest nod. Harrison was putting the pieces in place. And while he drifted in and out of lucidity, the performance outside the hospital room only intensified. Uncle Charles offered to handle the memorial planning. Aunt Eleanor asked for an advanced preview of the will just to ensure harmony. Evan began hinting that it might be time for him to step into a more senior role at Whitmore Holdings. My father, he paraded paperwork in and out of the room, claiming they were company updates Harrison needed to review. He's still Chairman Emeritus, Daniel reminded everyone. These decisions need his blessing. What he didn't say was that Harrison hadn't signed a single document. Not one. One night after another long day, Harrison looked at me and said something I didn't expect. "Do you remember the lake house?" I smiled. "You mean when I was 10, when I fell off the dock?" He chuckled softly. "You didn't cry. You bled, swallowed lake water, scraped your knees, but you didn't cry. You let your grandmother bandage you, then went back an hour later and jumped in again. I wanted to prove I wasn't afraid," I said. "No," he corrected gently. "You wanted to prove that falling didn't define you. That's what makes you different." He looked out the window as if watching the future arrive. "Use that, Sloan. Use that when things get ugly." Those were his last coherent words to me. He passed quietly at dawn, hand in mind, the light rising behind the hospital curtain like a promise only we could understand. His funeral was beautiful and artificial. Daniel wept. Evan made a speech. Aunt Eleanor critiqued the floral arrangements. I stood silent. The grief was real, but only mine felt honest. The rest of them were already thinking about what came next. And what came next, that was already in motion. Because Harrison hadn't just left a will. He'd left a system, a final move, and soon it would set the entire Whitmore legacy on fire in the best possible way. The reading of the will was set for the following Tuesday. Location, the Whitmore boardroom. 13th floor, downtown San Francisco, floor-to-ceiling windows, polished mahogany table, 12 leather chairs, and one ghost. Harrison Whitmore was dead, but his presence unmistakably alive. When I walked in, I felt the eyes. Some glared, others smirked. They all assumed I'd show up, accept a flower arrangement, and step quietly out of legacy. After all, I wasn't in the company. I wasn't even on payroll. Daniel sat at the head of the table, sleeves rolled to the forearms like a man already preparing for the throne. Evan looked freshly groomed, new haircut, custom suit. The cousins had taken the day off. Their smiles were faint, but I knew their real emotions, anticipation and greed. Alan Grayson walked in precisely at 10:00 a.m. and laid down the will with a silence that sliced the room. Per the last valid testament and directives of Harrison Thomas Whitmore, Alan began this document, reflects his final wishes, duly notarized and witnessed. Let's begin. It started predictably. To Eleanor, a charitable trust in her name for literacy. To Charles, a vineyard he already mismanaged in the 90s. To Evan, a symbolic $500,000 stake in the innovation branch. Enough to flatter, not enough to control. The air in the room shifted. Daniel's smile never wavered until Alan flipped the second envelope. "And to my son, Daniel Whitmore." Alan paused slightly, as if weighing every syllable I leave the personal property within my home. The artwork, the piano, the coins he always asked about, and a final check made out for $1. You could have heard the leather on Daniel's chair creak. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "He must have forgotten to update that clause," Daniel muttered, turning to Alan. "There is no error," Alan replied smoothly. "Your father reviewed this version 3 days before his passing. He instructed me to read it exactly as written. $1. That's a damn insult." Alan didn't blink. That was likely intentional. Then came the silence. The entire table turned. Alan reached beneath the briefcase and pulled out a sealed red envelope, and to my granddaughter, he continued turning to face me, directly. Sloan Margot Whitmore. I hereby grant full executive authority, including but not limited to financial control, operational voting rights, and founders' equity in Whitmore Holdings, currently valued at $38 million. Silence exploded into chaos. Evan stood. "What the hell do you mean, executive authority?" Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "She doesn't even work here." I stayed seated, completely still. The only sound was the whisper of paper as Alan slid the official share transfer across the table to me. That's when I did something none of them expected. I stood up, pulled out the blank check Harrison had once gifted me on my 25th birthday unsigned, a private token. Then I held it up. "He gave me this," I said, "but I never cashed it." I stepped over to the boardroom fireplace, flicked the lighter, and I burned it. A $38 million check disintegrating into ash while my father stared, mouth twitching, face red with disbelief. I didn't come here to inherit. I came here to protect. I looked at them one by one. You all thought you'd inherit an empire, but none of you ever built it. Harrison did, and he trained me not through bloodlines or favoritism, but through trust, through silence, through decades of watching who showed up and who only circled when it was convenient. Alan nodded faintly. "There's one more thing," he said. He pulled out a final letter, Harrison's handwriting. I recognized the pen strokes. If this is being read, it began, then I've gone. But if Sloane is still in the room, then she stayed. She chose duty over inheritance, legacy over ego, and for that, she will lead. He ended the letter with one line I'll never forget. "To my family, blood gave you access, but only character earns ownership." The aftermath, Daniel stormed out. Evan tried to charm me. The cousins went silent. The headlines the next morning, Whitmore Holdings inherited by granddaughter in silent coup. The press speculated. Some called me the invisible heir. Others asked, why her? But they didn't know what Harrison knew. They didn't know I'd been in every room taking notes, watching, waiting, enduring. And now I wasn't inheriting a company. I was rebuilding a legacy. They didn't even wait a full week before coming for me. The email arrived Friday at 6:17 a.m. sharp. Subject line, extraordinary session of the Whitmore Board, urgent review of leadership transition. They were trying to remove me. The same people who'd ignored every email I sent as a teenager when I suggested solar retrofits for the Florida factories. The same ones who laughed when I interned in R&D anonymously after college. Now they were quoting bylaws they never read to challenge my position. Daniel was leading the charge, of course, but he wasn't alone. Elena Zhao, the interim CEO, who'd once complimented my business acumen during a brief dinner years ago, had turned too. Why? Because she'd been promised the crown. Whispers say Daniel had secretly offered her permanent control if she helped strip mine. Monday morning came. I walked into the boardroom not as a guest, but as their legally confirmed majority stakeholder. They were already seated. Daniel at the head again, pretending nothing had changed. "We're here to ensure continuity," he said smoothly. "The company's too important to be left to an untested heiress." Elena added, "Whitmore Holdings needs experienced leadership in uncertain times. Markets are sensitive." I nodded politely, then handed Alan Grayson a sealed folder. He distributed it across the table. Page 1, a 27-slide forensic audit report, prepared by Dana Brooks, my financial advisor, time-stamped, legally certified. The final slide, undisclosed personal expenditures totaling $1.7 million, traced back to the discretionary CEO reserve fund used under interim authority by Elena Zhao and approved via proxy by Daniel Whitmore. Dead. Silence. Elena blanched. Daniel sputtered. "You had no right." As of the transfer of controlling interest, Alan interrupted. "Ms. Whitmore has full oversight rights retroactive to her grandfather's confirmation. That includes financial backtracking for up to 24 months. I leaned forward. "This isn't revenge, it's governance." Then I activated the screen. Slide 28, New Vision Whitmore 2.0, Sustainability, Inclusion, and Integrity. I unveiled my next move, 5 restructuring steps already in motion, divesting unethical fossil contracts, partnering with 3 eco-startups founded by female engineers, reopening the apprenticeship pipeline. Harrison began 40 years ago for first-gen college students. Elena tried to recover, asking to remain in a transitional role. I looked her dead in the eyes. "You use the company as a sandbox. That era ends today." Daniel stood glaring. "You're not ready for this, Sloane. Then why are you afraid?" That night, I sat in Harrison's old office. It was untouched since his death. On the desk sat an envelope with my name in his handwriting. They'll try to take it all back. Let them try. but never become them. Inside was a key to a locked cabinet I hadn't touched. I opened it and found blueprints, not for buildings, for the future. Harrison had drafted a contingency model plans to scale the company in new directions, ones the old board never would have allowed, and every single page signed over to me. By Friday, headlines had flipped Whitmore's youngest CEO fires back with ruthless precision. Elena Zhao removed an ethics audit bombshell, legacy daughter or corporate avenger. But I didn't need validation. I had a plan, and now the power to execute it. The board had tried to cut me out. I didn't just hold the door, I changed the locks. For days, the building was quiet. Elena Zhao's resignation triggered a full internal audit. Daniel no longer showed his face at headquarters, and I, Sloan Whitmore, age 28, sat in my grandfather's chair, not out of arrogance, but because I had work to do. Still, something gnawed at me. Harrison had left 52% of the company to me, but 6%, a silent minority stake, was unaccounted for. When Alan Grayson traced the trust structure, he found a series of transfers leading to one name we hadn't heard in years: Marcus Ellery, my grandfather's former protege, a man who vanished from public life 2 decades ago after a scandal no one ever fully explained. Friday, 8:30 a.m. A man walked into the Whitmore lobby. No security check, no badge. He was already listed as board-approved visitor on the internal guest log. Tall, white hair, sharp cane, sharper eyes. "Tell Sloan I'm not here for pleasantries," he told the receptionist. "I'm here to see what kind of heir she is." Alan met him first. They spoke for 12 minutes. No one else was allowed in. Then the door to my office opened. And there he stood, Marcus Ellery, once called the architect of Harrison's empire. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Neither are you," I replied. He placed a manila folder on the table. "Your grandfather gave me a choice. Sell my 6% when he died, or wait, watch, decide if the next Whitmore deserved it." Inside the folder were stock transfer papers, already signed. "You passed the audit, you passed the boardroom. Now pass this. Can you protect the people?" Not just the profits. I showed him the apprentice program plans, the partnership pipeline, the grants I'd started funding for women in STEM from rural counties just like my mother came from. His eyes didn't soften, but they stopped testing. "You're not Harrison." "Good." "No," I said. "I'm better. I was raised in fire." Hours later, I called a final emergency session, this time with full 58% control. Daniel was forced to attend. He looked worn down, like the wind had finally stopped pretending to blow in his direction. "This isn't personal," I said, calmly addressing the full board, "but my father knowingly enabled financial mismanagement under a proxy CEO. He undermined shareholder confidence, and he attempted to remove a legal heir using false pretenses. Effective immediately, Daniel Whitmore is removed from all executive and advisory functions. His stock is frozen pending ethics review." The room erupted. Some protested. Most just nodded grimly. Daniel stood. "You've destroyed this family." "No," I said. "You destroyed your own legacy when you couldn't stomach mine." That night, I stood alone on the rooftop. The city shimmered below like a map I now held in my hands, but my grandfather's words still echoed. "Power only matters if you give it away to the right people." So I called Lena, my assistant. "It's time to activate Phase 2. We weren't just rebuilding a company. We were going to reshape an empire into something Harrison would have never dared, something I would never apologize for. But one final twist still waited below the surface. A letter from someone I never expected, a truth about my mother that would change everything. A week after Daniel's removal, I received a package. No sender, just my name written in tight, deliberate handwriting. Inside was a letter, creased from time ink, slightly faded. The first line stopped my breath to Sloan when she's ready to understand the whole truth. "Love, Grandpa." The envelope was double-sealed. Taped inside the flap was a USB drive. Alan and I reviewed the files, silent. Cold coffee untouched, It was everything: photos, scans, a notarized statement, and one document that detonated my entire understanding of my family. My mother, Diana Ward, had not died in childbirth like I was told. She had lived. She had fled. Harrison had helped her disappear to protect me from Daniel, because Daniel had threatened her, not physically, but financially, legally, viciously. She'd tried to challenge his growing control within Whitmore Holdings when she learned he was laundering shareholder funds through shell vendors. She was silenced, pushed out. The hospital records were falsified with bribed signatures, but Harrison knew. He paid for her escape, and the clause in the will that granted me everything, it wasn't about trust. It was about justice. He couldn't protect her. So he made sure I would have the power to avenge both of us. I stared at a photo from 2001. My mother, arms wrapped around me as a baby, eyes fierce, but kind. It was the first time I ever saw her face. "We're not just bloodlines," I whispered. "We're proof that truth outlives control." That weekend, I traveled to a remote town in Oregon. The name on the mailbox was changed, but the woman who answered the door had my eyes. 2 hours later, I walked out with a folded quilt in my hands. She hadn't spoken much, just wept quietly as I told her everything: the downfall, the inheritance, the audits, the legacy. "He tried to erase you," I said, "but I kept the receipts." She touched my cheek like she wasn't sure I was real. "I didn't run to be safe," she finally whispered. "I ran so you could become dangerous." When I returned to Whitmore Tower, I called Marcus into the office. "It's time we change the logo," I said. He raised an eyebrow. To what? I slid a new design across the desk. The outline of a tree root's deep branches fractured but still rising. Below it, Whitmore and Ward. For the first time, I was no longer someone's daughter, someone's pawn, someone's backup plan. I was Sloan Whitmore Ward, a woman who burned down the family's lies to rebuild the truth. Today, I lead a company built from both vengeance and vision. Every boardroom speech ends the same way: you can inherit a fortune. But power, that's something you earn when the world swears you don't deserve it. And Daniel. He filed an appeal to reclaim his board seat. The judge laughed, then asked if he was aware his daughter now owned 76% voting power. Have you ever been erased by the people who should have protected you? Have you ever reclaimed your voice after being written out? Drop your story below. Subscribe and share if you believe silence can become strength. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing a daughter can inherit is the truth.